The concept of new infrastructure was talked about by China as early as 2018. But with the coming of the coronavirus, there's been a greater push to accelerate the idea. So what is the new infrastructure? How is it different from the traditional kind? And why is there such a push to get development rolling? To discuss these issues and more, I'm pleased to be joined by Michael Song, co-director of the FISF FinTech Research Center at Fudan University, Hong Hao, Chief Strategist of the Bank of Communications International, and Steve Lee, Vice Dean of Tencent Research Institute. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. Michael, for starters, what is covered by what is being called new infrastructure? What is your understanding of the term?
Yeah, so I think my interpretation is essentially the critical new general purpose technologies that's going to transform the world, and a lot of that has to do with the digitization of offline businesses, right? So I think I would classify this in three different categories. One is the technologies of ICT infrastructure, things like 5G, cloud computing, big data, AI. And the second category is on the convergence of these general purpose technologies for new industries, such as the transportation industry, we call that smart transportation, or the energy industry, we call that smart energy systems, right? And then the third category is the application of these general purpose technologies to scientific discovery, to product development, and general innovation. So I think a lot of it has to do with the ability to take offline processes, digitize them online, provide the ability to share that data around the world, and then to apply computing systems and then the AI and big data analytics on top to drive further progress.
And Hong Hao, of course, this new infrastructure also be compared by a lot of people to the traditional infrastructure. So are we saying that we have done enough traditional infrastructure, we have to come up with new ways of doing things?
Well, I think the stock of existing infrastructure spending has been huge, especially during difficult times when the economy is slowing down. For example, in 2009, investment-driven growth is about 80 to 90% of Chinese GDP growth. So I think at this point in time, even though we've done quite a bit of traditional infrastructure spending, the new infrastructure, as Michael just pointed out, it's a necessity for the future. So I think China, at this critical juncture, is actually looking out 5 to 10 years, to plan for the future and also spending big in order to be prepared for the future.
And Steve, you are doing research for an internet company. How does Tencent understand new infrastructure, and what is your role in this?
I totally agree with Michael and Hong Hao's interpretation of these new infrastructures. I think the new infrastructures, according to the NERC's definitions, has some kind of very distinctive characteristics. For example, they are digital and they are smart in the sense that all of them can collect some data and process and analyze these data almost in real time. And all these infrastructures are wired to the internet and could be coordinated across time and geographical regions and potentially being remotely controlled. So with some of the intellectual features integrated into these infrastructures, they could fulfill some of the automatic tasks. So all these features give these new infrastructures huge potential for the future development of other applications and industries.
And also, Hong Hao, as you said, there is a strong voice from the central policy makers to push for this. Premier Li chaired a State Council executive meeting recently, decided that China should speed up new infrastructure development in an effort to boost industrial and consumption upgrading. So does it have anything to do with the epidemic control that the world is at thick of?
I guess it's hard to say. You know, given that you mentioned since 2018 we're talking about new infrastructure spending. So I would say that the virus spread actually gave it a push. In a sense that, you know, at this point in time, we really want to spend money to prop up the economy, and there's no other better way to do it. And so new infrastructure spending basically been pushed up the priority list. I think, you know, going forward, you know, we do see a lot of benefits coming out of it. And also, I think China is leading the 5G development amongst the other things. So I think spending right now is actually going to give us a lead in developing new technology standards going into the future. So I think it is necessary to do what we're planning now, and also at this juncture, you know, because of the virus has slowed down the economic growth dramatically. So I think any help we can get from government spending is a good news for the economy.
Well, Hong Hao, the reason I ask this is because a lot of people worry that both consumption and export demand are very low. So turning to investment is a pathway of necessity and not of choice.
I think so. I actually agree with that. I think if you
well,
look
maybe
at
I can take a stab at this.
You know,
first Hong Hao,
let me finish first.
then Michael.
Well, let me finish. Yeah, let me finish first. Well, if you look at 2009, just now I mentioned that investment-driven growth is about 90% of the total growth, and also the Chinese net exports contribute negative growth to the overall GDP growth. So I think this year we're probably going to face more or less the same situation, with foreign demand collapsing. Domestic demand, because of the employment and economic slowdown, is not going to get much better than foreign demand. And also government spending is probably one of the few areas left that you can prop up the economy.
Michael, what do you want to say, the necessity to push for investment?
Well, if you look at GDP growth drivers, roughly speaking, about 60% of GDP growth in China now is consumption, and about 30% is in investment. And right now, because of the COVID situation, we have roughly about a 19% drop in consumption. However, online businesses actually are growing at above 15 or 16%. So I think if you look at overall the macro, there was a trend to become more digitized. Roughly about 30% of the S&P 500, for example, is in digital economy type technology companies. And that trend is irreversible. It's going to become more and more the case. And COVID-19 only accelerates that, as now much of the economy is offline, has been shut down. So everybody is now forced to go to the online version, from online education to telecommunication to telemedicine to online entertainment. So digital economy is going to be a major factor of that. And there is actually a multiplier effect, right? If you invest into the infrastructure, so they are saying now there's about 1.2 trillion yuan investment into basic 5G IT infrastructure. That's going to drive the investment by the private sector into the value chain, upstream and downstream, of roughly about 3.5 trillion yuan. And then the overall economic output or impact of that is something estimated to be around 25 trillion RMB. So I think by having that initial investment by the government, it will stimulate the economy in a positive way.
But Michael, the problem is it a pie in the sky? Because it takes money and it takes time. The construction of this new infrastructure would not solve the urgent problems of employment and bankruptcy of small businesses. Michael?
Well, there was an interesting report by the China Academy of Information and Communication Technology. They think that by adding this additional capability, for example, in 5G, etc., this is going to add 3 million jobs by 2025. So I think overall, allowing people to join the digital economy is going to stimulate the economy. The most fragile parts of the economy are the poor and small SMEs, and in both these cases, they don't have the ability to adjust to the issues with COVID-19. They lose their jobs, they're offline, they go home, they cannot join the digital economy or even go online. So therefore, by providing the basic infrastructure, the digital economy tools by which anyone and everyone, every citizen, every private company, every business, small and large, can join the digital economy, I think overall that's the fastest path to an economic recovery.
Hong Hao, do you agree? Do you share the optimism that digital economy will drive up employment?
I think in the long run, yes. I think definitely spending big on new technology and digitalize your economy is going to be beneficiary to the overall economy. The problem that we're facing right now is that, especially for the smaller SMEs and also the poorer echelon of the society here, the problem they're facing is that once they don't have job, they probably can't have enough cash to survive. And I think those are the near-term cash flow problem that they're facing. And even if you're spending big on infrastructure and new infrastructure, it's going to be long-term positive, but not going to resolve the short-term cash flow problem. And I think the banks need to do more. And I think today, we've seen a directive from the Shanghai PBOC headquarters to direct banks to lower the lending standard. And I think even so, even if we spend really, really big on infrastructure this year, I think the Chinese growth is still going to be, very, very low single digits.
So these all projects are still meant to have long-term effects rather than short-term relief for those troublesome businesses.
I think so. That's correct.
Okay, let's take a look. What are some of the social media users being talking about this new infrastructure projects? We have collected some of their opinions and voices from the internet. There are people from different parts saying different things about why we need infrastructure building at the moment. It seems that we still have some problems with running. Okay, let's take a look at what they've been saying. He said the infrastructure sector won't cause any big problems unlike finance and services, which may become bubbles if a crisis comes. Infrastructures can't be moved. What do you think, Michael? It seems he's suggesting that investment in infrastructure is probably better than in finance. I don't understand why services, because finance is probably a worrisome area. It might create bubbles. What do you think, Michael?
Well, I think overall, the other aspect of the equation in terms of digitization is actually the digitization of value, right? When we're talking about the first internet revolution, which was the digitization of information 20-some years ago, that basically made that information free, and then it democratized its use and access to the world. And because of that, we have all brand new business model innovation that can sit on top that drives the digital economy, which is becoming stronger, as I explained before. So now there's a second aspect of this, which is the digitization of value, where now any offline asset, okay, was previously unfungible, like, for example, real estate or bars of gold. We can now digitize that and bring that into the digital economy and provide the financialization tools on top in order to provide access to capital, which is a very critical aspect, cross-border payment, trade finance, and all the aspects of business that are necessary to get over the current crisis and into economic recovery. So I think that the digitization tools, the infrastructure, will allow small to medium businesses and other companies alike to be able to do business and recover.
But the question is, we have been enjoying the digital world for more than 20 years already. Everybody is satisfied with what we have. Why do we need to invest so much money in another more sophisticated infrastructure, which will demand a lot of money. Michael?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
I think what it is there are different phases to the digital economy, right? The first was just the digitization of information and value. But really, the power is when you can add big data, you can add AI on top, such that we can do smart, automated processing on top, right? And I think the multiplier effect from automation, from big data, is a huge, huge multiplier that's 10x the original effect of the digitization itself. So I think we need to be able to allow those technologies to thrive. I think when you talk about digitization, you have a huge disruption, and that causes an effect what we call demonetization. Basically, commoditization of new technologies and business models and processes which will be given as tools to the masses, and that will drive economic productivity as well as massive financial inclusion.
Okay. But still, we don't know how multiplier effect will play out. So, Hong Hao, people are worried whether the investment in those new infrastructure, which needs a lot of capital, are worth it. You are working for
That's
a
right.
banking corporation. Will you invest
That's right.
in digital infrastructures as people wished?
Well, I guess at this point in time, there is no other better investment choice that is available. But I think in economics, we're dealing with constraints. So, if you want to achieve something, you have to invest. And to invest in a new field, you're taking on new risk, and also the capital has a cost attached to it. So I think, for now, even though we can see very long-run benefit of, getting from new infrastructure spending, now the problem is that, over the past few years, what you see is that the more our economy become digitalized, the harder it is for the smaller guys. All right, so market shares is being grabbed by larger companies, and I think SMEs are having it very, very tough. And I think this time of the year, because of the economic slowdown, and also because the smaller guys are more vulnerable to this economic shock, at this juncture, if we spend big on new infrastructure spending, even though it's long-run positive, but we're not solving the right problem in the near term. So I would say that, despite a very positive long-term effect, we really need to help the smaller guys to get over this period.
But obviously, provincial governments at different levels have the strong drive to push forward those projects. We have seen different provinces and regions release 2020 investment plans for their projects. The overall investment list includes more than 10,000 projects. I saw 700 from Sichuan, about 1,500 from Fujian, involving a total investment of 34 trillion yuan, or $4 trillion US. Do you think this kind of investment will come through, and where will the money be coming from, Hong Hao?
Yeah, the number is very large. It doesn't sound right. The point being, just now we mentioned in economics we're dealing with constraints. So for a number of local governments, they don't actually have the balance sheet to do it, so they have to raise more debt. And I think for some of the local governments, because of the economic slowdown and also because of the lower proceeds from land sales, for this year, the budget is hugely in deficit. All right, so if they want to raise more debt, they have to ask for help from the central government. And I think at the end of the day, the central government is going to help them out. But then how much distance, how much more willing the central government is willing to help this sort of a struggling local government remains to be seen.
But the central government is also in debt,
numbers,
considering that China has seen a 6.5 economic decline in the first quarter. The central government's coffer is also depleting.
Yes, but I think we're running a budget deficit at about 3%, just over 3%. And I think over the years we deliberately keep our budget deficit at that level. So I think it's time to expand it. All right, so we can expand it to 6 to 8%. So that gives us leeway to help out the local governments to issue local government bonds. And also we can sell Chinese yuan denominated bonds overseas in overseas market, because overseas market the financing rate is cheaper as well. So there are many ways to do it, but I think at this juncture, because the local government are struggling, so I think the central government needs to step in to help them out.
It's not just how much amount of money will be spent, but how it will be spent. Let's look at the chart. The Research Institute of the Bank of China estimated that the investment scale of those 7 new infrastructure areas in 2020 is about 1.2 trillion yuan, 7% of the total number of 2019. Among the 7 areas, intercity high-speed and urban railway transit investment and 5G base stations and related equipment investment account for the top 2 highest amount, about 650 billion yuan, 250 to 300 billion yuan respectively. And the others is big data and smart city. So Michael, what do you make of this chart and the areas that it involves?
Well, I think, again, the core IT infrastructure of the future will be driven by things like cloud computing and 5G. We already see that there's a lot of smart city deployment, and actually China is probably the only a country in the world that can actually do scaled deployments of smart city. All that takes infrastructure. You need to have the cloud computing, the cryptographically secure databases interconnected by 5G, and also to overlay the AI and big data on top. I think that infrastructure development, in my opinion, is very well served, because what it does is it drives consumption ultimately. If you look at online consumption across the board, online grocery delivery, online e-commerce, online telemedicine, all these are the things that were already major trends, but are huge macro trends post-COVID. And so all that consumption online requires the basic infrastructure by which to have it operate on. So therefore, my opinion is that infrastructure development will have that multiplier effect.
And Steve, I know that Tencent has been trying some pilot projects to use your advantages in combination with traditional industries. Industrial Internet is one concept that you've been championing. And Tencent Cloud has recently a success in its internet plan with TCL. What exactly is that cooperation? And can you tell us about how an internet company can join a traditional manufacturer?
Sure. Before I introduce this cooperation between Tencent and TCL, I may just add a few points about the new infrastructure project. I think I don't think there's a direct link between the announcement of the new infrastructure project investments and the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of the projects like 5G, like AI, has been circulated around for quite some time. And all these are, like the 5G building up plans, construction plans has been planned out in the past 2-3 years already. So that the COVID-19 may not just be the reasons why this term has been coined and been circulated. And the new infrastructure investments are for the future growth, not for the short-term growth, that's for sure. And it will support for this, actually like the engines for the future digitalization of the whole Chinese economy. If you wanted to do the economic relief because of COVID-19, is not only a demand side shock but also a supply side shock. What we've seen that a lot of local governments actually come up with their own plans to stimulate the local consumptions. They have distributed the so-called digital coupons through these internet company platforms like Meituan, like Alipay. And what we observed is that all those local governments who have that kind of stimulus plans, their consumptions bounce back much quickly, significantly quickly. Than those that without such a consumption plan. So that may be the right place to put the money on. Not like to directly invest in some like highly uncertain, innovative, in the essence projects like the
You still have not explained
like
your cooperation with TCL.
Okay, sure. This actually the cooperation started from the 2008. The Tencent, there were actually 3 teams competing for this project, and the Tencent AI team actually won this competition. And this whole project is about this. You know that the Huaxing factory's product is the TFT LCD plate. It's like printing all the circuit on the faces of layers of glasses. And this reliability and quality of this printing is very critical for the success of the downstream products. So that previously the factory actually employs an army of inspectors to do the quality control of this production. And actually, these assembly lines produce 6 million pictures per day. And every inspectors have to overview about 10,000 pictures per day. And they work on shifts and 7/24 to do the inspections. And it's a repetitive work, and it's easily wear out, so that this is the task that perfectly to be solved by an artificial intelligence.
What can Tencent offer them to make them work better?
After the research team studied about, I think, 6,000 pictures only, and they come up with this algorithm that can do.
So you provided algorithm for them to work with the scripted detection better.
And the trick is you have to build in this algorithm into the manufacturing process, the manufacturing softwares. They're called manufacturing executive system. You have to build it in without interrupting this production process, because you know this assembly line is like a stream, and it has to continuously producing. If you do the disruption to stop it for a while, then the cost is huge. So that's the trick. And after the application of this process of the AI, actually the time spent on the quality control reduced about 100 times.
The reason that I asked this question is because many people ask, where does the incentive to invest in the infrastructure come from? Should be market-driven, or it should be policy-driven? Hong Hao, this is a question that you guys probably want to weigh in.
Yeah, I think at this point in time it's mostly market-driven. You know, because over the past 10 years we did benefit substantially from digital and new technology. So I think, you know, we're now spending big. I still remember more than 10 years ago we spent trillions of yuan on the high-speed railway system, and it's only after 10 years later did we realize that it's such a tremendous achievement for the Chinese economy. So I think, you know, the way we're spending on new technology is more or less the same. But I think, you know, after this discussion, you know, after all the fancy sort of a technology, digitalization of our economy, I still miss my local grocery stores.
All right. Thank you very much. We're running out of time. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Hong Hao. And thank you, Steve, for sharing your insights on this. And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Zhu in Beijing. Goodbye.